Hello, my name is Will Mitchell. I'm a professor of strategy at Duke University. This video provides a brief introduction to industry analysis, to strategic analysis. The video supports the strategic analysis primer, which provides additional content that you can work with. Okay, your basic goal in industry analysis is to identify threats to your existing business and opportunities that would allow you to expand or ultimately transform your business. So basically, opportunities and threats. And we can use different frameworks for doing industry analysis, and I'm going to walk you through what I call the 5 forces plus 3 more framework. Before I dive into that framework, I wanted to think about both the strengths and the weaknesses of analysis frameworks. Industry analysis frameworks are basically data reduction techniques. They're ways of organizing complex information and making sense of information from complex environments. So they allow us basically to pull a bunch of things out of the world, organize them in ways that when you fit them together, they make sense in ways that they didn't when you didn't have them together. At the same time, it's critically important that we avoid over-reduction. I mean, it's easy to sort of fit things into frameworks in way to force things down to fit, and that can cause problems as well. So our goal is really to find some balance between fitting things into the framework so that we have a deeper understanding of what the information means, while not paring away information that's critically important. Now, I use a framework that, as I say, that I call refer to as the 5 forces plus 3 more. This is essentially an extended version of Michael Porter's well-known 5 forces framework, but at the same time adds 3 additional factors that I've come to believe are critically important for us when we're making sense of environments. That there's regularly information out there that fits into those three boxes, those 3 lenses more effectively than they do into the other 5. Now, again, a caution: no matter what framework you use, whether it's the 5 forces plus 3 more or some framework that you develop on your own, it's critically important that you recognize that the value of industry analysis is in identifying the most important factors that are affecting your business now and will affect in the future. Okay? And there's two errors you can fall into. One is looking at the past and doing an industry analysis based on the way the industry used to be, rather than the way it is now and the way that it's becoming. Industry analysis needs to be a current-oriented and future-oriented activity. The second is there's a tendency at times to try to view industry analysis as an exercise that is a checklist exercise, a fitting things into boxes exercise, where we've looked at customers, we've looked at strategies, we've looked at rivals, and now having done that, we can go on to the other things. It's not that. It's a tool that allows you to identify opportunities, identify threats, so that you can go on and actually do something about them. And so it's not a laundry list, it's not a checklist. It's a tool that you use that allows you to act strategically. Now let's look at the 5 forces plus 3 more framework, and then we'll talk through the general framework, and then we'll talk through an example. And the framework, I believe in starting with customers, looking at your customer context, understanding who your customers are, your current customers, and potentially your future customers, either people that are in the market now that you're not selling to, or people that might come into the market. And to break that down carefully, look at customer segments, look at different demand characteristics in different customer segments, look at price sensitivity, look at service and quality sensitivity. Just to have as deep an understanding as you can about who's out there that buys your product, who's out there and services, who's out there that might buy your services, and what they need in order for you to be able to serve them. And so everything ultimately comes down to providing goods and services to customers at a price that they're willing to pay, and at a price that allows you, with enough margin, that allows you to make a profit that allows you to continue. So let's think about the forces that affect your ability to provide that high-value, profitable goods and services to customers. One's rivalry. And so you need to have a deep understanding of who your competitors are, your rivals, because they're trying to sell to the same customers. What are their strengths relative to you? What are their weaknesses relative to you? Where do they operate? Which segments do they operate in? Which segments do they not operate in? To gain a deep understanding of the competitors. And not just your current competitors, but the competitors that might come in. And this is particularly important because, as we said earlier, we want you to look forward rather than in the past. Look forward into competitive conditions, and especially look forward into changing market conditions, for changing customer conditions. And so, especially once we recognize that customer conditions are changing, threat of entry becomes a real factor. We need to understand not only who's there now, but who might be there in the future. And entrants can come from different places. Sometimes they're new firms that grow out of nothing or are spun off out of existing firms. Sometimes they're firms that are operating in other markets, other geographic markets, or other very different product segments that can diversify in, either diversify geographically or diversify across product markets. And the intriguing thing is that once you start looking for them, they actually often become very visible. They're operating, and you can often identify the firms that you may be competing with in the future that you're not competing with now. So threat of entry is one factor. Another threat of substitutes. What are your customers using now, and what might they use in the future? What products and services might they do a better job? Imagine, think of the recorded music industry, where many customers clearly have moved from CDs to downloaded music. Think of medical care and surgery, where in some cases people have moved from surgery into pharmaceutical care, or from open heart surgery into drug-encoded stents. So again, threat of entrant from firms, threat of substitute from new goods and services. It's important also to look upstream at suppliers and understand the supply conditions in your industry, in your supply chain. Who are the key suppliers? Who are the key suppliers that you're dealing with? Who are the key suppliers that you're not dealing with? What are their cost conditions? What are their quality conditions? What are their speed conditions? What are their innovation conditions? How effectively can they work with you? Do they have good management skills? Do they have weak management skills? Do they have power over you? Or do you have power over them, or is it some sort of balance? Again, a deep understanding of the supply side of your business, of the upstream side of your value chain. So those are the 5 traditional forces that we look at: customers, rivals, potential new products and services, and suppliers. In addition, it's important to look at 3 more forces. We need to look at complementary organizations, firms that provide not sort of direct components, but complementary components. Things that, whether they're goods or services, that need to be coupled with your goods and services. So if you're in the computer industry, you need to look not only at the disk drives that go into your box, but you need to look at firms that are designing software, whether it's operating system software or application software. In many industries, you need to look at standard-setting organizations as complementary organizations that influence your ability to provide goods and services to customers. So in addition to looking at suppliers, in addition to look at rivals, you need to look at the complementary organizations who either actively or passively you're going to need to partner with. Second sort of new force to look at is new strategies. Not just what firms are out there, but what strategies they're using. How are they changing their cost structures? What new ways of operating are they using to differentiate? And it's critically important to look inside your existing rivals, look inside potential rivals, talk to their customers, talk to their suppliers, and understand how they're changing what they're doing. And it sounds daunting to do that. But the truth is, people are amazingly willing to talk about what they do, and often have to talk about what they do in order to do it. And so once you start paying attention to what your rivals are doing and what other firms in the industry are around the industry are doing, it's often very possible to identify new strategies, new ways of operating, so that you can respond ahead of time rather than waiting to be hit from behind. Finally, it's critically important to look at social forces, to understand changes in laws, changes in regulations, and not just the formal laws and regulations, but understand changes in social norms that may influence your business. If you're in the pharmaceutical sector, understanding people's attitude towards pharmaceutical pricing and their understanding of the pharmaceutical, their belief in the value of pharmaceutical companies is critically, centrally important to that industry. If you're in the tobacco industry, understanding people's views on tobacco and smoking is critically important. If you're in the alcohol industry, understanding when people believe it's appropriate to drink, when people believe it's not appropriate to drink, has a major influence on your ability to operate successfully in that industry. So again, you need to understand changes in laws, the formal laws, the formal regulations, but also the informal social norms that are influencing your industry. So 8 forces, 5 that we think of as traditional forces, 3 more that will affect you in essentially any industry in which you operate. Now, here's an example of the 5 forces plus 3 more industry analysis framework in practice. And I'm not going to go down into deep detail on this case, but I'll use it as a way that you can organize information that serves as a basis for identifying opportunities and identifying threats. And this is an example that's drawn from the Mount Auburn Hospital in Massachusetts. in Cambridge, and based on its operations in the late 1980s. And this is a hospital that was faced with very difficult time in the late 1980s, and it went through a thoughtful analysis of its situation across these 8 boxes. It looked at its customers and recognized that there were increasing service demands, that there was more information about healthcare options, and there was more demand for accountability and outcomes. Substantial change in the customer environment that it was going to have to respond to, or the truth is it would not be able to survive. It looked at its rivals. It recognized that that it had strong local competition and, in fact, growing strength in local competition. Also, a degree of consolidation that was making competition more difficult because it was having bigger and, in some cases, stronger rivals. And there was a growing set of distributed competitors, firms hospitals that one didn't originally think of as being competitors, which were providing a variety of services in different settings that were now competing directly with Mount Auburn Hospital. So changes in the customers, changes in the rivals. Also changes in suppliers. Device suppliers, sort of the physical goods suppliers, device, IT, the pharma innovation. Changes in the primary care environment, in which of independent physicians and practices of physicians who were the referral options for Mount Auburn. Changing needs for medical specialties, whether it's in cardiac care or OBGYN, the medical specialists having changing needs for the support that they needed to provide their services, and in turn the support that Mount Auburn was going to have to provide in order to attract and to keep specialists. Changes in substitutes with pharmacy and outpatient care, in-home care, challenging some of the traditional hospital services. Potential entrants, hospital expansion from outside the traditional region, so geographic expansion. For-profit expansion, chains that one used to not think of as being in existence. One thought of this as being a non-for-profit sector, now increasingly becoming a for-profit sector with chains that were expanding very aggressively. And outpatient expansion, services that were done outside the hospital setting becoming more aggressive and more widespread. So across the 5 traditional forces, change in the customers, change in rivals, change in suppliers, potential entrants emerging, potential substitutes emerging. New strategies, certainly related to some of the pieces we've seen, the growth in ambulatory care. Some of the new entrants using this, some of the traditional players using this. So again, speaking to Mount Auburn's need to think hard about the types of services that it might provide outside its existing facilities, whether in outpatient facilities or even in patients' homes. Complements, very important changes from payers, both local payers in Boston, regional players across the state, national players in the U.S., and even to some extent internationally, setting reimbursement limits, creating greater accountability for outcomes. And having Mount Auburn both having to be aware of the changes and to think about strategies for how to shape the changes, so that it wasn't just a sort of a regulation taker, but it could be a regulation shaper. And finally, social forces. Very strong changes in views on regulatory limits, formal issues around expansion limits, and so beyond these formal regulatory constraints, real changes in people's understanding of what medical care is and what hospitals are, the types of care and the types of services that hospitals should provide. A movement from people viewing this as medical care takers to being people that expect to have a voice and expect to be treated as clients and to some degree as partners in the medical care process. So 8 boxes identifying important opportunities, important and equally important threats for Mount Auburn in 1998. Okay, now we've talked through sort of an analytic framework and drilled down into an example in the Mount Auburn case. And recognize when we think about the Mount Auburn case, the key point of the analysis is that Mount Auburn faced severe, strong challenges. Opportunities, yes, and also just absolutely strong threats. And if it didn't respond to the threats, and also, frankly, if it didn't take advantage of some of the opportunities, it would almost certainly fail as a viable healthcare provider. In the extreme case, it might shut down, more likely to be taken over by another hospital. And let's recognize that industry analysis leads you to the next step in analysis. And so when you read the primer, one of the things to look at is how you move from industry analysis to capabilities analysis. Because the point of industry analysis is to identify the opportunities and threats so that you can be in a position to assess the strengths and weaknesses of your current business and understand how its capabilities fit with respect to those threats and with respect to the opportunities. Now, one thing I want to stress at this point, and this in a real sense is my summary point for thinking about industry analysis, is that industry analysis is not an algorithm that somehow miraculously gives you an answer. Unfortunately, I guess, I'm not sure if it's fortunate or unfortunate. Ultimately, I think it's actually fortunate. Analysis allows you to build a platform in which you can see the world and use that platform to use thoughtful judgment. It's not an algorithm, but it does give you a base so that you can see more, that you could use your experience, you could use your insights, you can use your knowledge to have a thought, to arrive at a thoughtful judgment about what the opportunities are, what the threats are, and how you can go on to take advantage of them and address them. And I really like this quote from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, because if there's anything that one would think of as being algorithm-driven, it would be a science laboratory, the jet propulsion, where the tolerances have to be absolutely critical, and you'd think that it was all math and all just straight, clear science. And the JPL likes to say, yeah, we do the science, boy are we ever scientific, but then ultimately what we do is precision guesswork. And we use our experience, we use our science as a base, and then we try things out, and we use our judgment to decide on what the next step is. And that's what your job in industry analysis is to give yourself a strong base, do it as precisely as you can, build a platform so that you can see the world, and then you use your judgment to give you a sense of what the next step will be.